Hi everybody, my name is Anna Goldenberg. I'm an occupational therapist, and today I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what do OTs look at when we observe handwriting skills in children. So when we observe a child's hand and how they use their hand, we observe many different micro elements of it, and for each activity we observe different things. So I just wanted to really hone in on handwriting today, and it's like a big topic of its own, and every other activity kind of has their own way of analysis. So let's talk a little bit about what do we look at in handwriting. So the first thing an OT would look at when they observe a child using their hand for writing is whether they're using their hand in a static or a dynamic way. When a child uses their hand in a static way, they use all their muscle groups to create the same movement. When a child uses their hand in a dynamic way, they also use all their muscle groups, but each muscle in the hand is working in a differentiated manner. So each muscle has its own skill and its own force and its own way of moving to achieve the same goal. So for example, when we see a child using their hand in a static way, we kind of go back and see how much exposure did they have to fine motor activities growing up. And like usually to increase dynamic hand use, we kind of reintroduce these skilled and precision targeting activities. So the second thing we look at when we observe a child using their hand for handwriting is their radial and ulnar differentiation. So we have a hand, and we have the radial side of the hand, and we have the ulnar side of the hand. The radial side of the hand is actually used for skill and precision, and the ulnar side of the hand is used for directing the hand and force. So when a child is writing, they're usually holding the pencil with their radial side of their hand, and they're using their ulnar side of the hand to guide the palm to where it needs to be on the paper. The third thing we look at is wrist extension. When a person has wrist extension, their wrist is a little bit elevated, and that creates automatic flexor force in their palm and in their fingers. So when the wrist is extended, they have to use less force from their muscles of the hand to write. When the wrist is flexed or neutral, a lot of the force comes from the small muscles in the fingers, and that creates fatigue in a child when they're writing. The fourth thing is their grasp quality and their grasp type. So the best grasps are quadruped and tripod grasps. So that's when the child is holding the pencil with the first 3 or the first 4 fingers of their hand. And we also see whether the grasp type is static or dynamic. When the grasp type is static, the child is holding the pencil in the right position, but all the force is coming from their upper arm and their shoulder, while their hand is locked as one unit. When the child is using their hand in a dynamic way, their shoulders relaxed and their elbows relaxed, and a lot of the movement is coming from their fingers, so that there's a lot more precision in their hand and a lot more control. So the next thing we look at is, so for grasps, we want to make sure that it's an adaptive grasp. There are other types of grasps that are good and positive, and there are grasps that are maladaptive and that will hinder a child from being able to later write efficiently when it comes to higher quality, higher quantity, higher speeds, higher efficiency of written work. That's when the grasp type is going to matter, and when it's kind of going to like either enable them to grow or hinder them and be kind of like an obstacle for them to grow in their written work. So the next thing we look at is their posture. Even though when a child is writing, really they're just using their hand, a lot of our body is like a kinetic chain, and everything is important. So we look at their head position, their neck position, their shoulders, their elbows, their wrist, and their fingers. So when a child is positioned ergonomically, the flow of force travels through their body efficiently, and they're able to focus on their wrist and the hand in a skilled way. when we see something like shoulder hiking or their elbows out in the air, it just shows that they're kind of like those rigid movements, they're stuck in a maladaptive position. So we kind of trace even further back to see how is their core strength. So if their core strength isn't there, usually they're going to have an effect, it's going to have an effect on their shoulder and elbow and head positioning. So everything is really interrelated. And the last thing we look at is their hand dominance. So at 3 years old, we want to see a strong hand preference. At 4 years old, we want to see a strong hand preference. By 5 years old, we should see a dominance. When a child does not develop a dominance by 5 years old, it just tells us that the nerve pathways in their corpus callosum are not yet mature. So that's the horizontal pathways that connect the right and left hemispheres of our brain. And when those pathways are mature, we're able to specialize. So when a child forms a dominance, they use that dominant hand to grow in skill. When their dominance is switching, they're growing in skill at a much slower rate. So they're not able to use their hand to like build up on the skilled hand use. So it's kind of like, imagine a doctor and a nurse going to work, and every day they're switching their positions. That's kind of going to be confusing for everyone. Today I'm doing this, today I'm doing something else. When everyone knows their role, the dominant hand can build and the supporting hand can support, and then with that it takes less effort and it takes less attention. So that's how that's why dominance makes a big effect on the child. When the dominance is not formed, we look at neurological things and we look at other issues with either learning or crossing midline or coordination. Physically, when we look at the hand, we look at the muscles in the hand, we look at the palmar arches, we look at the web space between the thumb and the fingertips, the fingers, and opposition. So thumb opposition to each finger, the ability to open and close each finger, adduction and abduction, and the ability to use your hand for in-hand manipulation, so such as like translation, shifting, rotation with our fingers. All these things affect handwriting because being able to manipulate objects in a skillful way is a prerequisite to being able to use your hand to control the pencil and then to form letters and then to form them fluidly and easily and seamlessly in the future. So I hope that was a good quick summary that was useful. If you have any questions, please message me. Please reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram or email me. I'm so happy to help you. Have a great day.